report is continuing at a fast pace and is on schedule. Bahamians make up 76% of the workforce on the project. Of the $88 million that has been spent to date, $30 million in contracts has been awarded to local contractors. 2 new government office complexes are under construction in Grand Bahama and Nabucco. The completion of the Magistrates Court complex on Nassau and Beacon Streets. Development of a new port at Iraqi has commenced. It now appears that a number of the stalled tourism-related developments may restart during the new fiscal period, including the $100 million expenditure by Kushner International, and the continuing aggressive public sector capital spending planned for this fiscal year. These projects, along with a modest general improvement anticipated in the overall economy in the medium term, will put us in a more favorable economic position than we have been in recent times. This notwithstanding, it is necessary to note that the gains will be modest and conditions in the global economy remain fragile, warranting caution as we move forward. I now turn, Mr. Speaker, to the recurrent fiscal performance for 2009-2010. The current revenue, sir, is being severely and adversely affected by the ongoing weakness in economic activity. It is now estimated that it will come in at around $1.295 million in 2009-2010, or 17.5% of GDP. This is 94 million short of what was forecast. And I might say, Mr. Speaker, this is the least amount of shortfall I expect. It could be more. The current expenditure in 2009-2010 is expected to be at $1,554 million, up slightly from the $1,530 million allocated in 2009-2010 budget. The bulk of that increase, sir, resulted from the funds used by the government for its 6-month employment program announced at the end of 2009. It was a 6-month program. Notwithstanding the headline regarding this one, it was for 6 months, and the 6th month expires. Financial constraints will not permit a continuation of this program. Allowing for capital expenditure and debt redemption, the GFS deficit in 2009-2010 is now estimated at a whopping $425 million, some $139 million more than projected in the 2009-2010 budget. Relative to the size of the Bahamian economy, the GFS deficit will stand at 5.7% of GDP, up from the estimated 3.9% for this period. The government debt will be at $3,510 billion at the end of 2009-2010, or 47.3% of GDP. The government debt, I repeat, will be at about $3,510 billion at the end of 2009-2010, or 47.3% of GDP. And I turn, Mr. Speaker, to fiscal policy for 2010, 2011, and beyond. The current environment requires a fiscal policy that calls for expenditure restraint as well as enhanced revenue measures in order to put the public debt on the proper downward trajectory. In 2010-2011, we are holding recurrent expenditure to the same level as last year of $1,554 million. This is unchanged, I repeat, from the amount expended in 2009-2010. In real terms, the current expenditure will decline by some 1.9% in 2010, or by roughly $30 million. I repeat that. In real terms, the current expenditure will decline by some 1.9% in 2010-2011, or by roughly $30 million. Beyond next year, our operational target is to further reduce recurrent expenditure relative to GDP. While recurrent revenues can be expected to benefit somewhat from the modest economic growth that is projected, there can be no doubt that significantly higher levels of revenue are required. Our near-term objective is to get the ratio of recurrent revenue to GDP up to 19.7% in 2010-2011, which must be compared with the actually got in 2009-2010 of 17.5%. So in 2010-2011, we are projecting a revenue of $1,492 million, and thereafter, at a minimum, to increase revenue to 20% of GDP in the years beyond 2010-2011. To that end, ongoing efforts to enhance revenue administration and collections will be redoubled and further strengthened. And to further secure the anticipated and critical increase in revenues, the government is implementing a number of new measures that are expected to contribute additional revenue. In order to attain our overriding debt targets, it will also be necessary to exercise restraint in respect of capital expenditure in the years to come. In line with commitments and the need to provide ongoing support to the economy, these expenditures will rise modestly in 2010-2011 to 3.5% of GDP. However, beyond that fiscal period, it is our intention to hold capital expenditure to 3% of GDP. The expenditure restraint and revenue enhancement measures will result in a significant reduction in the GFS deficit in 2010-2011 to a level of $227 million as compared to $425 million in 2009-2010. I repeat that. We are proposing to cut the deficit in the forthcoming fiscal period from $425 million to $227 million. That will represent a significant reduction in the deficit relative to the size of the economy from 5.7% last year to 3% in 2010-2011. Government debt, sir, at the end of 2011 is projected to stand at 49.2% of GDP, up from the 47.3% to which I referred earlier. The near-term and medium-term implications of our fiscal action plan are presented in the multi-year fiscal projections that are included in the annexes to the communication, which will be circulated to members as soon as I take my seat. Importantly, Mr. Speaker, we'll be saying in these projections that through our fiscal action plan, we fully expect to meet our short-term target of firstly slowing the rate of growth of government debt to GDP, and then setting it on a downward trajectory. The debt to GDP ratio is projected to fall to 48.7% by 2012-2013. In light of the key fiscal priorities of this budget, overall allocations to government ministries, departments and agencies in 2010-2011 are being reduced by 2.6% from their level in 2009-2010. Despite this, all should still have sufficient funding to meet their core mandate to the public. Priority spending will continue to be given to education, to health, to national security. In order to secure the attainment of our fiscal objectives, the government is also implementing a number of targeted expenditure reductions, namely, the salary of the Prime Minister is being reduced, the basic salary of the Prime Minister is being reduced by 10%, and those of parliamentarians in both House of Assembly and the Senate are being reduced by 5%. The duty allowance paid to the Prime Minister and ministers will be reduced by 50%. For the Prime Minister, the combination of these two measures amount to 16